Hallo und herzlich willkommen zu meinem nächsten Video und dem Thema Blasenentzündung und interstitielle Cystitis. Und in diesem Video möchte ich euch mal den Mann vorstellen, der mich zur Heilung gebracht hat, der mir geholfen hat, diese Krankheit, interstitielle Cystitis, die in der Welt der Urologie als unheilbar gilt, wirklich zu heilen. Und das innerhalb von 5 bis 6 Monaten. Und dazu möchte ich euch ein Video einblenden, das Anthony William vor einiger Zeit auf TikTok veröffentlicht hat und in dem er erklärt, welche Ursachen diese Erkrankung hat und was auch wichtig ist wegzulassen an Ernährung, an bestimmten Nahrungsmitteln, um heilen zu können. Viel Freude beim Schauen.
People who are dealing with interstitial cystitis are dealing with an underlying issue that's never being looked at. For one, many people with interstitial cystitis have had bacterial infections, they've had UTIs along the way, bladder infections, kidney infections, but what's causing those infections? Streptococcus is the big one right there, and people have a lot of Epstein-Barr in their system. So let's talk about how they can get the interstitial cystitis. First of all, their bladder can get rough on the inside. So let's go into that a little bit. What happens is when you have viral and bacterial infections, over time, the inside of the bladder gets kind of rough. Yes, little bits of scar tissue inside the bladder, and it gets very hypersensitive to the nerve. So your pudendum nerve, which goes to the bladder, actually triggers off a lot of signals because you feel all this discomfort and pain. You could feel burning and all of that. So there's different kinds of bladder issues, different kind of interstitial cystitis issues. So let's go into that a little bit. When it's viral related, somebody could have a virus inside their liver like Epstein-Barr, because that's the common one right there, and it produces a lot of neurotoxins, and you're urinating these neurotoxins out, okay? Another thing is the shingles virus. Many people have the shingles virus, and they'll have that in their body as well, and that will produce neurotoxins, and those neurotoxins get into the bladder and they need to be urinated out. Neurotoxins from viruses create hypersensitivities to the nerves inside the bladder, creating a problem where you feel like you have to pee all the time, or you're in pain when you're going to the bathroom. Now, streptococcus gets in the bladder because many people who have UTIs in the past, or they had PID, pelvic inflammatory disease, or any other condition, streptococcus plays a role, or IBS, or intestinal conditions. Strep gets into the colon, it gets into the bladder, it gets into the reproductive system, and as these years go by, the strep, as it's sitting inside the bladder, it can create a lot of inflammation. So people walk around with inflamed bladders, right, on the inside, like that, because of bacteria like streptococcus that sit inside the bladders. So let's talk about food. So people often say, well, you know, my bladder feels better when I don't do fruits and I don't do vegetables and I don't do herbs or anything like that, and I just keep it to eggs and cheese and lots of cheese. Like lots of people say, well, I could eat a whole bunch of brie and it's not gonna bother my bladder. My interstitial cystitis feels good. And they'll be like, I eat lots of eggs and that doesn't bother my bladder either. And I could have ice cream and that doesn't bother my bladder. And other kinds of cheese. I could eat pizza and that's not gonna bother my bladder. But if I have a fruit shake, if I have a smoothie, or I eat some fruit, or I eat something like that, then all of a sudden my bladder hurts. But what they don't realize is the inflammation's already there. So when you have something like a piece of fruit, or you eat a salad with different vegetables on it, and now you're getting irritated in your bladder, and you're like, oh my God, my bladder hurts, so I can't do that. I have to go back to just hard-boiled eggs, or go back to scrambled eggs and fried eggs, and go back to pizza, because that's making it feel good. I could eat a whole thing of cheese and that doesn't bother my bladder. And it's not giving me overactive bladder, but the minute I actually eat something like a fruit, I get irritated. And many people have said that. And the reason why is because the problem's already there. The bacteria's already there. The inflammation's already there. So these other different fruits, like fruits and leafy greens and herbs and vegetables, are just showcasing how tender the area is. So it forces us back to pizza, and it forces us back to eggs, and it brings us back to bread. Bread feels so soothing when you have that, but that's a vicious cycle on its own. It's a catch-22 because these foods are contributing. The cheese and the dairy and the eggs and the gluten are actually feeding the pathogen, the bacteria, making the problem worse over time. So eventually you have such a serious condition with interstitial cystitis that everything hurts, even the foods that seem soothing, so that when you do a vegetable or a fruit or a leafy green or a herb, you all of a sudden feel much worse because all along you were using foods that you thought were giving you ease and comfort, but those foods were making the problem worse and worse over time. And that's a big mistake when it comes down to interstitial cystitis. So it's about getting the inflammation down, and it's about healing the lining of the bladder, healing the linings of the kidney, and everything else too. It's all about all the reproductive system and the urinary tract system and the intestinal tract system.
Ja, das waren die Infos von Anthony William zu dem Thema Blasenentzündung und interstitielle Cystitis und die Ursachen dieser Erkrankung und wie wichtig es ist, auf seine Ernährung zu achten. Das heißt, Milchprodukte, vor allem aber auch Eier und Gluten aus seiner Ernährung zu streichen, wenn man diese Krankheit heilen möchte. Die anderen Dinge, die ich gemacht habe, Selleriesaft und Nahrungsergänzungsmittel, seht ihr in meinen anderen Videos und ich wünsche euch ganz, ganz viel Heilungskraft und Durchhaltevermögen, um dieser Erkrankung Herr zu werden. Gute Besserung.